At first glance, words might seem like nothing more than random noises or scribbles on a page. But in reality, a word is one of the most fascinating tools humans have ever created. It's a kind of shared code, a silent agreement we all understand without ever formally signing up for it. Linguist Ferdinand de Saussure pointed out something striking. The connection between a word's sound, say tree, and its meaning isn't natural, it's arbitrary. There is nothing inherently tree-like about the sound tree. Yet, we all accept it. And that collective agreement is what gives language its power. But how do we even process this system? Noam Chomsky proposed that the human brain comes pre-equipped with a kind of universal grammar, a mental blueprint that allows us to turn sounds into structured language, no matter what tongue we're born into. Languages also have hidden rules, like phonotactics, that determine which sound combinations feel right. That's why something like HSLVEX doesn't sound like a word, because it breaks the sound patterns our brains expect. And words aren't static, they evolve. Take dad, for example. It likely originated from simple syllables that babies babble naturally, like da or dada. Over time, those sounds solidified into a word that still carries meaning today. In the end, words are more than just tools for communication. They're bridges. Bridges between thoughts and sound, between people, and across centuries. Languages, it turns out, have their own internal logic, secret rules for which sounds are allowed and which are not. Linguists call these phonotactics, but put simply, they're like a dress code for sound. Some combinations are acceptable, and others get turned away at the door. Take Hawaiian, for instance. It only allows words to end in vowels and completely bans consonant clusters. A word like strength? In Hawaiian, that would be almost unpronounceable. It simply doesn't fit the rules. On the opposite end of the spectrum, there's Xhosa, a South African language known for its click consonants. To many of us, these clicks might sound random, even alien.
Okay.
But in the 1920s, linguist Clement Doak showed that these clicks aren't chaos. They follow consistent, structured patterns, just like any other phoneme. But what about the very beginnings of language, when humans first started making sounds? In the mid-20th century, linguist Roman Jakobson studied baby babbling and discovered something fascinating. Certain syllables like ma, pa, and da appear across virtually every culture. Why? They're among the easiest sounds for a baby's mouth to form. That simplicity became the building blocks for words like mama and papa across dozens of languages. And back in the 1800s, psychologist Francis Galton conducted an experiment. He tried to teach children completely made-up words to see how well they'd retain them. The results? Not great. The children struggled to remember or use the nonsense terms. This suggested something profound. Our brains don't just crave sound, we crave pattern and meaning. Even ancient tongues like Latin and Greek obeyed strict phonotactic systems. These rules helped maintain clarity, consistency, and allowed these languages to spread across empires and time. Language, in a sense, is a massive, ongoing social contract. Philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein captured this idea with a famous line: "The meaning of a word is its use in the language." In other words, meaning isn't fixed. It's shaped, stretched, and evolved by how we use words in everyday life. Take the word mouse. For centuries, it meant the small, furry animal. But with the rise of personal computers, mouse also came to mean that device you move with your hand to control the cursor. When you hear the word bank, your brain has to choose. Are we talking about the edge of a river or the place where money lives? Usually the sentence gives it away, and we barely notice this mental gymnastics. But it's happening constantly. Linguists refer to this web of shared understanding as semantics, the study of meaning in language. Back in the 1920s, Ferdinand de Saussure, the same linguist we mentioned earlier, offered a groundbreaking idea. Language is a system of signs. Each sign connects two things: a signifier, the sound or word, and the signified, the concept it represents. It's this connection that gives words meaning. Words are dynamic. They're shaped by history, culture, and daily use. They're less like objects and more like relationships. So, next time you say something simple like hello or coffee, remember, you're not just making sounds, you're participating in a centuries-old collaboration, one where meaning lives in the minds of everyone who shares the code. In the 1940s, linguist Roman Jacobson studied baby babbling across different cultures and languages. What he found was remarkable. No matter where the child was born or what language their parents spoke, the earliest sounds remained largely the same. These aren't just baby talk, they're biologically driven. And more than that, they likely influenced the earliest forms of human language. Words like mama, dada, and papa aren't universal because everyone copied each other. They're universal because they emerged naturally from the mechanics of speech itself. So, when you say dad, you're not just using a familiar word. You're using a sound that echoes across time and culture, rooted in biology, embedded in connection, and born in the first breaths of speech. Everyone's kind of scared of their dad. But are you scared of words? Logophobia is the fear of words, especially new or unfamiliar ones. It sounds bizarre, until you realize how deeply language can mess with your emotions. Take a moment. The word dad, it's just 3 letters, soft, simple. But for many, it's emotionally loaded. It carries gravity. Why? Because language isn't just made of sounds, it's made of memory. This is where linguistic phobias come into play. Real, measurable fears tied not to what a word sounds like, but to what it means. For example, hippopotamonstrosesquipedaliophobia. Yes, that's the actual name for the fear of long words. Kind of cruel, right? Or nomophobia, the fear of being without your phone. A word that didn't even exist a few decades ago, yet now hits a nerve for millions. But what about everyday words? Words like moist, daddy, or even dad. In 2014, psychologist Paul Thibodeau ran a study to explore this. He found that people didn't hate the word moist because of how it sounded, but because of the emotional baggage it carried. This is called a semantic reaction. Your body reacts to meaning, not just syllables. Words can be triggers. Some phobias go even deeper. Onomatophobia is the fear of specific names, like panicking when you hear Tom, because of something that happened years ago, or graphophobia, the fear of writing, often rooted in anxiety, dyslexia, or trauma. So when someone flinches at the word dad, they're not hearing just a word. They're hearing power, expectation, love, loss, fear, a whole world packed into one sound. Back to dad. You'd think every language must have a word for father, right? Actually, not really. In the Amazon, the Paraha people speak a language with no fixed word for father. Instead, they describe relationships in context, like the man who made me, or the older male who lives with us. It's not cold, it's just a different way of thinking about family. In Ta, a language spoken in Botswana, the concept of father merges with social roles. The same word might describe a dad, an uncle, or even a tribal elder, because who raised you is more important than strict biological ties. This leads us into something called linguistic relativity, the idea that language shapes how we think. If your language doesn't carve out dad as a distinct concept, your brain might not either. It doesn't mean you love less, it just means you categorize differently. By the way, I love the man who named Jello. Well, Jello. It just sounds right. That's sound symbolism, where certain sounds just feel like the thing they describe. Think about it. Glitter, gleam, glow, all feel shiny, right? But slimy, slippery, sludge? Sell sounds practically drip. In English, this effect is subtle. But in Japanese, it's a full-blown system called phonemimes and memetics. Words don't just label reality, sometimes they imitate it. Here's a wild one. In the Canary Islands, people don't always use words to talk. They whistle. It's called Silbo Gomero, a whistled language that carries across mountains. Whole sentences, entire conversations just in pitch and whistle. Right now, Earth speaks around 7,100 languages. That's a crazy amount of variety. But here's the dark side. Over 40% of those languages are endangered. Every 2 weeks, a language dies. By 2100, more than half might vanish. No one knows the exact number of words spoken worldwide, but here's a guess. English alone has about 1 million words, including slang, jargon, and science talk. Even if the world started speaking in one universal language, no misunderstandings, no awkward pauses, no need to ask, "What do you mean?" We'd hear each other clearly. But would we still feel each other completely? Because language isn't just a bridge, it's a fingerprint. It's how a child learns love, how a stranger becomes familiar, how home sounds different depending on where you're standing. Each language holds its own poetry, a rhythm of thoughts shaped by land, struggle, joy, and time. And when one fades, so does a way of seeing the world. Sure, a single tongue could unite us, but maybe it's our differences that make us worth understanding in the first place. The broken phrases, the soft accents, the words that don't translate but still make you smile. That's the language of being human. So as we zoom out, past cities, borders, and noise, remember, we were never meant to sound the same as it. We were meant to listen anyway. And maybe, in all this beautiful confusion, there's a kind of love that speaks without needing to be understood.